gender relations, declining fertility rates, and more.
People need to be awake and they need to people need to be awake and they need to be aware. They need to stand up against the sun.
So recently, Black Pigeon Speaks put out a video, Leftover Women and the Gigolos That Love Them. And I took a certain issue to this video. Essentially, my issue with it was the basis of it was it blamed women for the lack of families. And I think that it's a much more complicated issue than just the lack of, well, they're saying women don't want to marry because they have careers and they put off marriage. And that may be contributing to the problem. But I want to raise a question. Who are women supposed to marry? Because here's my issue. Okay, let's go back to 3 years ago. Black Pigeon Speaks put out another video, MGTOW and the Cancer of Porn on Society. And in that video, he talked about how men being, turning to porn instead of turning to women, or our sex-obsessed society having a lot to do with the lack of families. Now, I want to hone in on that because my experience as a woman, I want to talk about my dating experience. They always complain, like, they say, oh, you women, you have, like, you put up a dating profile and you might get 100 responses. Okay, first off, I don't think I've ever gotten 100 responses. The men that respond to profiles that I used to have up that had my picture on it, they were particularly obsequious, told me I was gorgeous, this and that. And then they would get sexual. The comments would get very sexual. And I don't understand when we have a society where pretty much all men are obsessed with sex and men are not interested in getting married, and yet you blame the women. Women are not the ones who don't want to get married. You're saying women don't want to get married because they're doing careers. But there's plenty of women who are either doing a career or just, having a job, and they want to get married, but there's no one for them to marry. And the proposition on the video was for women to marry young. I think the implication there was that women should marry older men. But how much older? I mean, that's the thing is, 5 years, 10 years, okay. But in the Jewish community, they set people up. I've been set up with guys who are 30 and 40 years older than me. And that's just absolutely insane. And if we're going to be honest with ourselves, back in the historic time when people got married, men were usually only a year or two older. People got married at like 18, 19 years old. Like, when my dad was growing up, my parents married very late. Back then, you'd graduate high school. The women would go and get like some kind of secretarial job or a job in like a warehouse. There were certain like factory warehouse type jobs that were like women who worked them, or they'd get a job as a typist, this and that. And men would go and work in like hardcore factories. And if you look at, that's kind of what happened with my parents, but they didn't marry until later in life. So my dad joined the Navy when he was, I don't know how old, but it actually wasn't even straight out of high school. He actually dropped out of high school, joined the Navy, and then he was able to finish high school in the Navy. And then he got out of the Navy and he was like working as like a heating and refrigeration repairman. There were a lot more of those kinds of jobs. If you think about it, the kinds of machines my father would have gone and fixed. Like at one point, he worked for Sears, so he went to people's homes and fixed their refrigerators. I believe he knew how to fix more than refrigerators. But we don't really fix refrigerators anymore. You buy a fridge, 10, 15 years later, it breaks and you just get a new one. Everything my father would have fixed. I think he also fixed like dryers. I remember as a child we used to have, you know, a few times our TV broke. TVs were very expensive back then, very heavy. And we used to have like a TV repair person who would come when the TV would break. We had a little tiny, I don't think it was even 19 inches. It was like maybe like 12 inches black and white, or yeah, it wouldn't have been 19 inches. We had a tiny little black and white that we would like break out every time the TV broke, and we had to wait for the TV repairman to come. You don't do that anymore. TVs are cheap now. You throw them out, you get a new one. You don't have those kinds of jobs. There are very few jobs that men can do where they can get out of high school and get a job. Even the same jobs, people say in the comments like, oh, my coworkers now, have to have a PhD, and when I started in my field we only had to have a bachelor's. And degree inflation is a big part of the problem, but this is not just a part of the problem that women are to blame. I would blame the corporations. But getting back to what really upset me was, who are women supposed to date and marry? Because let me explain to you, as, a woman in the dating field, people tell me, oh, it's so great, you get on dating websites and there's so many men who will contact you. First off, not that many men, like I already said. But one of the other issues is, most of the contacts that I always got, I didn't even meet the guy and he was like sending dick pics, asking those kinds of questions. In fact, you might say like, okay, meet somebody in person, but it's the same thing. When you meet guys in person, you go, okay, he actually asked me for my number. I'm trying to do the girl thing and like not ask him for his number and not flirt with him and, let him take the lead. And they finally call up. They like take your number. Sometimes they don't even call for a year. They take your number. They finally call up. And all they want to do is put out sexually charged language. They ask explicit questions. Do you shave your hoo-ha? And what bra size are you? And all sorts of other like disgusting, And what ends up happening is I hang up on them. So you hear all these men saying it's because women won't give men a chance. Well, back when my dad was, in the 40s and 50s and 60s, before the left I know the left was gaining a foothold. They really started at least the 50s, maybe earlier. But society was still, for the most part, against what they wanted. They just didn't fight against it, is one of the reasons why we had problems. But most people weren't like that. Back in those days, men didn't talk to women like that. Because no woman would have put up with it. And the problem, going back to how it is a problem with women, is there's way too many women who are tolerating it. There's too many institutions in society telling women to tolerate this. Even look back, changes in my lifetime. When I was before high school and high school, teen magazines used to have letters to the editor from girls saying, like, my boyfriend's pressuring me for sex. And the response was always, to push back on it and tell him you're not ready and this and that. Now, teen magazines are telling girls to try anal with their boyfriends. Teen Vogue big time. So there's been big changes that way. I think it's unfair to blame the women or to almost laugh at women, be like, they're all going to be a bunch of cat women. No one wants to talk about the part that men have in this. Men are not backlashing it and choosing to look for wives. They're complaining that women are not getting married. But the same men who are saying, women are riding the cock carousel and all of this, such as the custom with the MGTOW movement, those same men are they, if you talk to them about, well, maybe you should date women who don't dress provocatively, date women who cover up a little more. That's one thing is, I don't get that many men approach me because I don't dress in a certain way. And a lot of the women, they want a guy and they see that that's what gets attention from men, so that's how they dress. And you have all these men who are like, thoughts, 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 but it's where men are giving their attention that are causing women to act this way and to behave this way, because from what they can see this is the only way to get male attention. And no matter how much you try to explain to them that it's the wrong kind of attention, the problem with that is if they cover up, they're not going to get any attention. So on one hand, you're telling women that they're bad people for not getting married and having families, but how are women, explain to me, how are women supposed to find a man who's actually looking for marriage? Because there doesn't seem to be a lot of them. You know, that's one of the big problems. I can't even tell you how many, almost every guy I've ever talked to, whether I meet him in person or meet him online, like I said, it's explicit, inappropriate questions. On the, in my case, on the rare occasion that a guy is actually looking for a relationship, I'm generally eliminated because, they always, men always say, I don't have that big of standards. It's just this, this, and this. But there's a hidden standard that men tend to have that comes into play with me, is that men require a woman to have been loved by her parents. And I know that sounds really strange, but men who do actually date me, who are interested in a relationship, will often ask me if I was close to my family growing up or if I'm close to my family now. And my mother loved herself more than me. I mean, she wasn't too bad. My father outright hated me. Told me this on a regular basis. So, my mother's dad, even when my father was still alive, I wasn't exactly close to my family because you're judging me for not being close to somebody who tells me on a daily basis that they hate my guts. Somebody who tried to kill me a few times when I was a teenager. I'm being judged for not being close to that person. I came from a messed up family, and when people hear that, they generally run the hell away. And it's kind of hard to avoid because people ask very pointed questions about, like, my family, and it's like, moving on. Because I don't have one. My family, my parents put a roof over my head. My parents were divorced. That's another thing that, like, men who were family oriented, like, if your response to me is that I should find a guy in the church or in the synagogue, the problem with that is church boys don't date me. Jewish boys who are religious don't date me. And the reason why is because I didn't come from a religious home. So even when I was in high school and in the age bracket that everyone says women are supposed to get married, like, 18 to 22 or whatever, when I was in that age bracket, I was a Christian. When I was in high school, I was a Christian, very interested in different boys from my church, and I was basically told by them, members of the community, and so on and so forth, I was told repeatedly, you're not from a Christian home, these men are off limits to you. You can't have one of them. I was told only to date a Christian guy, but Christian guys were off limits to me because I wasn't from a Christian home. It's a bit of a catch. I can't talk. Bit of a catch-22 going on there. And I've basically gotten the same sort of thing within the Jewish community. In fact, there's one woman who's a friend of mine. I use the term loosely. she will often be telling me stories and bring up friends of hers, and then she'll be like, oh, they have a single son who's age appropriate for you, but I can't set you up with him because his parents would never let him date a girl who, didn't come from a Jewish home, who wasn't, also wasn't raised religious, or whose parents are divorced. It's like, and I'm thinking to myself, like, why bring it up? Why not just tell me the story? Why do you need to tell me that they have a son my age if it doesn't mean anything? All right. I think I've made most of the points that I wanted to make. I just wanted to point out that there's another side to this, that you can blame women for having careers, but there's definitely the side that many men are looking to just sleep around and not settle down. And they're not exactly, approaching women like they want to develop relationships. And yet, you're criticizing us women for not getting a relationship. When, like I said, there's not, men that are looking for a relationship are very few and far between. So, and it's not like I dress provocatively. This is what we deal with as women over and over and over again. And even you complain. I remember one time I was complaining to a religious Jewish married man that, men ask me inappropriate questions, and his response to that was, well, they want to know what they get. So men who I've not even met will ask me on the phone if I like to give blowjobs because he's marriage minded. Miss me with that nonsense. Please get out of here. Get out of here with that nonsense. So I think, though, it's good that Generation Z seems to be pushing back on that a little bit, because it's the Gen Zs who talk about thoughts, but I don't know. We'll have to see. What are they choosing with who they choose to date? If men are only choosing to approach women who dress provocatively, how are you going to get mad at women for dressing that way? How are you going to say that women should dress modestly when, literally women have so much pressure on them from other women that you have to get into a relationship? And I've been told to dress provocatively to get into a relationship, but then what happens is, if a woman does it, people turn around and, if a guy starts grabbing your ass or whatever, then it's your fault. And it's not really even so much the men that blame the women. The women tell the women, do what you got to do to get yourself a man. You got to try to get married. But at the same time, if you try what seems to work to get male attention, then you get judged for doing it. It's like it's a no-win situation for women. So I've made peace with being single, but this nastiness, it's not like men aren't, there's not a part that they play in it. If men are going out there and only talking dirty to women, and they're not approaching women as if they're looking for a relationship, how can they themselves ethically get angry at women who didn't get married? Look to yourself as well. It works both ways. And so I wanted to give the other side to this. All right, I think that's it. Thanks for stopping by my channel. I'll see you all next time.
They need to be awake and they need to be aware. They need to stand up against the stuff. Oh, well, people need to be awake. People need to be awake and they need to be aware. They need to stand up against this stuff.
Oh, well. And it's so politically engaged.
And it's so politically engaged.